So I know one thing that everyone's asking all the time, and this is not only during this exceptionally unusual time of COVID, but throughout anytime someone is going through immigration, is case processing times. People always want to know how long my case will take, and I know that's not always a straightforward answer, but can you kind of give us some insights onto how people could figure out times or what those are typically looking like now?
Definitely. I do think that's the top question people have. And I mean, it's understandable because that's what impacts your life a lot. People, I think the underlying current there is how long am I going to be separated from my family? What kind of plans can we make for our future? And so it's frustrating not, being able to get a straight answer, but there really are a lot of variables that go into what the final result is for any given case, which is why it's difficult to estimate. But I can kind of explain some ways that people can estimate, potentially how long their case could take, and how, as lawyers, we tend to give general estimates, and as well as just some of the variables that go into what the wait time ultimately will be. But basically, there are different phases in the process depending on what type of process you're doing. Phases that go through USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, have estimated processing times on uscis.gov. So say you're doing a naturalization, or you're doing the first step of a spouse visa or a fiance visa, an I-130, I-129F, you can actually get on their website and see how long, based on where you filed, the case. They require you to file in a certain location, but depending on where you live, sometimes there are slightly different processing times. You can look up the form number and see how long it's supposedly currently taking. Now, those aren't always 100% accurate by any stretch of the imagination. It's a very ballpark, but at least it gives you an idea of when you could start complaining if you hadn't gotten a decision by that time, is essentially how those work. Coley's smiling because at our office as a paralegal, he puts in a lot of, past processing time inquiries when people, pass that threshold, and we can start bothering the government about it. But so at least that gives you some idea of, okay, well, they're saying this is, 9 to 13 months right now. But I think a lot of times people are confused because many processes like fiance visas, like spouse visas, are actually multi-step processes. So the USCIS portion of that is only the first step, and it doesn't tell you how long the National Visa Center step is going to take, how long it's going to take waiting in line at the embassy to actually get an interview. So when we're trying to estimate a particular case, we can take a look at how long is each, we try to find an estimate of time for each step in the process. There are parts of the process, like the National Visa Center, where there is no official estimate or way to find out, and lawyers are typically estimating that based on just doing hundreds of cases always that are going through. And so we're just seeing kind of what the most recent has been with a lot of our clients around the world. And so that's where we come up with those estimates. So all that aside, I think that it's important to understand that there are basically two types of things that cause delays in cases. This is how I like to think of it. And maybe this is a little bit more like psychology and self-motivation or something, but I think it's important to be able to, handle the stress of this. There are things that you can't control about this process. And then there are things that you can control that help it move faster. So the things that we can't control are, how long does USCIS take once I mail the application in to process? How long does the National Visa Center take to get back to me? How long is the actual queue of people waiting for interviews at the embassy? When do the embassies reopen? Those are all things we can't control. So rather than spending a lot of energy feeling frustrated about those things, which is easy to do, I think it's important that people spend their energy trying to control more of the variables that are actually within your control. And that would be filing your application as soon as possible, versus waiting to get things done, making sure it's done quickly and correctly so that you have less back and forth with the government. So the fewer errors you have on your forms, the better it is, the better your evidence, the less chance that you'll have things kicked back, which takes additional time. And another thing you can do to prepare is to be informed about future steps in your case. So the more you're aware of what you need next, what's coming down the pipeline, and you're prepared before the government even asks you for it, then you're not, there's no time on your clock. It's just you're waiting for the government, and then you give them, as soon as they let you move to the next step, you're like, boom, and I've got that, and I've got that, and everything's prepared ahead of time. So I think those are the main ways that you can control the time frame. And I think those are also the main ways that, sometimes people ask, does it make my case go any faster if I have an attorney? And technically no, because we don't have any control over those variables that are uncontrollable that I mentioned that are on the government side. But those other variables that we can control, making sure the filings are pre-prepared, making sure they're done correctly so you have less chance of getting stuck in different places, those actually do frequently add up to significant amounts of time. So I would just say focus on what you can control and kind of let go of the rest. I think there's like a prayer about that actually with the Serenity Prayer, knowing what you can control and knowing what you can't. I mean, sometimes that's the appropriate way to go for immigration.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think having that right frame of mind is incredibly beneficial for going through this process and focusing on the things that you actually do have a little bit of control and can kind of have some more influence over, and trying to focus on those things. I think that's really a great perspective to have, and hopefully anyone who's going through this tough process can try and focus their energy on those things where they can control them.